Hello everyone, my name is Sai from Design Plus Code, and welcome to my new course, Jetpack Compose for Designers. In this course, I will show you how to create an Android app using Google's very own framework known as Jetpack Compose. Jetpack Compose is Android's modern toolkit for building a native user interface. Relying on the Kotlin programming language, you can easily get an Android app up and running with just a few lines of code, as shown over here. What's very cool about Jetpack Compose is that it's very powerful and that you can create a lot of UI with very less code. If you're coming from the iOS and SwiftUI world of developing apps, then you'll be pleased to hear that Jetpack Compose is the SwiftUI equivalent of the Android programming world. I'll show you how to work with tools such as Android Studio and the Android emulator that comes with Android Studio to build an amazing app. So what's this app that we're going to build in this course? Well, let me show you the design. Building up around the recent hype around NFTs and Web3, we'll be building a sample NFT marketplace application for Android. You can see that we have three simple screens here. We have the onboarding screen, which welcomes the user to the NFT marketplace. Then we have the showcasing home view, which shows all the trending collections and the top sellers of the NFT world. And then we have a tab view at the bottom, and clicking on the second tab takes us to this third screen over here, showing us the rankings of all the NFTs and how much they're worth and how much they've increased or decreased in value. You can see this in the attached Figma file, which you can download below, and you can see how all of this works together with different components when stringed together create this amazing application that you see in front of you, designed by the Design Plus Code team. So now let's see this app running in action. Switching over to Android Studio, you can see that I have my emulator on the right, and you can see that this is the completed project over here, but we'll get into all this code throughout this course. We can see that we have the Welcome to NFT Marketplace over here, and I can click Get Started Now, which will take me to the home page. And you can see all of these amazing, gorgeous looking views, such as collections, lists, scrollable animations, and more. And I'll teach you the fundamentals of passing data between different components inside of Jetpack Compose. Clicking on the second tab over here, you can see that I have the stats page over here. And you'll also see that along with scrolling, when I click on the activity tab, we have this very slick animation sliding between the two tabs. And I'll show you how to perform animations in Jetpack Compose as well. Now let's get started by creating the Jetpack Compose we need using Android Studio. If you've taken one of my Flutter courses before, then you know that Android Studio is the IDE we use to develop Android applications, just like we use Xcode to develop Swift or iOS applications. Now, Android Studio is a great type of IDE, and so if you haven't downloaded it already, make sure to go to the link that I've given below and download Android Studio depending on the operating system you are using. As of right now, I'm using the latest version, which is Android Studio Bumblebee 2021.1.1 Patch 2 for Mac. So once I open up Android Studio, I can go to Project, and I'm going to click on the New Project button in the top right. I'll get a pop-up, and I'll be given a bunch of templates for which type of project I'd like to create. And you can see that there are a ton of templates that Android and Google give us in order to create a proper Android application. Of course, there's too much to look at, but what we are really focused on is empty compose activity. So select this template, and then click on Next. Now we need to give our project a name. So I'm going to say NFT Marketplace. Make sure that the package name is a reverse domain, such as your domain but given reversely, in this case io.designcode, and then the following will be the name, all lowercase. And now be sure to choose a proper location to save your project. So I'm going to save mine inside of my downloads folder right over here. Make sure that the language is set to Kotlin, and what's really cool is that Jetpack Compose supports a wide variety of Android operating systems. Right now, we have the minimum SDK set to API 30 with Android 11.0, but we can change this to anything we want, from anywhere as far back as Android 5.0 of API 21. And you can see that if we choose this minimum SDK, our app will run on 98% of all devices. For now, I'm just going to set it to Android 9.0 with API 28 with Android Pie, such that the app will run on approximately 69% of all devices, which is pretty good. So then I'll select Finish. And Android Studio may take some time to prepare the workspace. Now once Android Studio has finished setting up the project, you can see that we have our tab bar given to the side over here. And so if I open up the Java folder and then go to io.designcode.nft marketplace and open up mainactivity.kt, short for Kotlin, then this is going to be our starting file that Android Studio looks at in order to begin our application. Let's go into split mode over here and see what it currently looks like. So I'll click on the split button in the top right, and it's going to initialize a preview. It's going to ask us to first build and refresh before the preview can be loaded, and we can see below that the Gradle build is running. And as soon as that is up and running, we'll see a preview of the code that is given to us as a template. And here we go. We have a default preview over here, and you can see that as of right now, it simply shows the text "Hello Android." And that's pretty great. In fact, if we run the application now, what's going to happen is that the emulator will pop up in the side. So I can go back from split to code view over here, and then the Gradle build will keep running, but pretty soon the application will open up on our emulator, and we can see how the app might look if it was actually running on an Android device. And once the installation is complete, the emulator will launch the application. And we can see that as soon as all the initialization is done, we have a very simple app that says "Hello Android" in the top left corner over here. And this is very similar to what we saw in the split preview over here, which is just the label "Hello Android." And when put onto an application, it displays that view in the top left corner. Now before we move on and build our first component for Jetpack Compose, what we want to do is finish some housekeeping and logistics first. I'll go to Android Studio in the top left corner and click Preferences. Then, under Languages and Frameworks, I'll select the Kotlin option, and I'll make sure that my update channel is set from stable to early access preview. This will give us access to some of the experimental features that Kotlin has and some of the APIs that will be released in a future version. The reason why we're doing this is because we're going to need some of these experimental APIs in order to make our NFT marketplace application look as good as it does. Then what we're going to do is open up Gradle scripts in the project navigator on the left. And you can see that we have two build.gradle files over here. One Gradle file applies only to the whole project, and the other Gradle file appears to just the module, indicating just the application that is running inside of our emulator. I'll select the first build.gradle file, and what I'm going to do is change the Compose version from 1.0.1 to 1.1.0. And this is only going to work if you've changed your Kotlin preference from the stable channel to the early access preview channel. And of course, you'll have to install some packages when you do switch initially. Then what you're going to do is add the following lines of code to the build script over here. And this is going to install some dependencies and the repositories that we need. Finally, what we're going to add to our build script is this all the way at the bottom, which you can just copy and paste given to us below. And this is going to allow us to use the experimental features that come with Kotlin. So now I'm going to click Sync Now, and while that's happening, I'm going to switch over to the build.gradle module file, or the second file over here. First, what I'm going to do inside of the module build.gradle file is add the following line under compile SDK. I'll type build tools version, and the version is going to be 30.0.3. Then what I'm going to do is scroll on down to where we have the compile options and change the Java version from 1_8 to version_11. I'll do the same over here, making it version_11, and I'll change the JVM target to 11 as well. Scrolling down a bit more, what I'm going to type inside of the compose options is add a new line saying Kotlin compiler version, and I'll set the version to 1.610. And that's it. I'll leave everything as is and click Sync Now once again. And I'm going to stop running our application, and then I'll run it again to make sure that all the changes have worked properly. And so you can close the build.gradle files, and you should see that Gradle build is running again. And as soon as that is finished running, then we should be able to see that our application popping up and opening as normal. And there we go. Once the launch has succeeded, our application opens up looking just like it did before, meaning that we have successfully migrated to a newer version of Kotlin. Now don't worry if this was all very complicated. I promise you Jetpack Compose is a lot more easier than all the setup that we had to use. We'll build our first component, with Jetpack Compose and explore the basics of what it means to build a UI component using Jetpack Compose, what composable functions are like, and how to preview our UI components inside Android Studio. First, navigate over to mainactivity.kt, which should be inside of the Java iodesignCode.nft marketplace folder. Now over here, you can see that this was the template that we were given. Right inside of the main activity class, which is our first entry point for the application, we have a function called onCreate. And what onCreate does is it sets the content of the UI that a user will see. We have some composable functions that we use, such as the NFT marketplace theme, which is useful for theming our application with various colors, shapes, fonts, which we'll get into later. Then we have the surface container, which is simply a UI container that we use to make sure that we fill the maximum size and color the background of this container. And inside of this, we pass a UI component called greeting. Now what I'm going to do is remove the greeting component, and then I'll also remove the greeting function over here and simply add our first Jetpack Compose element, simply called text. And here I'll simply say, hello Jetpack Compose. And I'll add an exclamation mark. And then what I'll also do over here is make sure that I copy the text and paste it over here inside of our preview. And here you can see that once we build and refresh, the preview will load and it'll display a simple text element saying hello Jetpack Compose. And there we go. This is how Jetpack Compose works. Just like SwiftUI, it's a declarative framework that relies on functions to build the user interface of anything we want. Using composable functions, we're able to define certain components, and stringing all of these components defines the screen, which can then be used to build the application that we want. At the very base level, each UI composable function returns a UI component that is stringed by multiple elements, much like this text element over here. Throughout the duration of this course, we'll explore various different elements, such as this text element over here, such as row and column and image. Speaking of image, we actually need to import our assets. So what I'm going to do is right click on the res folder over here, then go to open in and select Finder. Now inside of the res folder, I have the drawable-v24 folder right over here. And so instead what I'm going to do is open up the assets folder that you should have downloaded. And inside assets, I have the drawable-v24 folder over here. And all I'm going to do is drag and drop this into the res folder over here and simply click on replace. Now this is going to give us access to all the assets that we're going to use and all the images that we need inside of the application. And you can verify this by going back to Android Studio, opening up res, drawable, and you can see all of our images over here. Now let's build the first component. Taking a look at our Figma design file, we have the login screen, and this is going to be the first screen that we build. You can see that the elements used are very simple. We have a container for all the elements, which has this background image over here. Then we have a text element, some space in between, and then this card element given to us over here with two text elements and a button element. So let's see how we can build that inside of Jetpack Compose. Let's start by building this mini card over here, which simply has two text elements and a button element over here. So what I'm going to do is create a new component, and I'll do that by typing add composable, then I'll type fun, short for function, and I'll type onboarding card. I'll add a set of parentheses and then a set of curly braces, and this is how you define a composable function, which can then be used as an element when we create the login screen. Along with our onboarding card, we also need to preview the onboarding card. So what I'll type is add preview, which will let us know that we need to preview the following function. Now the following function has to be composable. So once I type the add composable keyword, then I'll type fun, card, preview, add a set of parentheses, add a set of curly braces, then enter NFT marketplace theme, and inside of the curly braces, I'll enter onboarding card. And now we have a preview for the card preview as well. So for example, if I copy the text over and paste it inside of onboarding card, and for now let me remove the default preview as we won't really need that preview. And now if I build and refresh, you can see that we should have the same preview shown over here, but the label for the preview is going to say card preview, letting us know exactly which component we're previewing. Now let me change the text of Hello Jetpack Compose to what we actually want, which according to our design is explore and mint NFTs. So I'll type explore and mint NFTs. Now I also have a secondary text given to us below, and the value for this is you can buy and sell the NFTs of the best artists in the world. So I'll copy that text, add another text element, and paste that inside of quotation marks. Now you'll notice something, which is that if I build and refresh, you can see that both of these text elements appear one on top each other. In order to make sure that the texts appear in a vertical stack, what we're going to want is to arrange them inside of a column element. So what I'll do is select both of these text elements, I'll cut it out, and then I'll type column, and you can see in the autofill that the column element appears. So inside of the column element, I'll paste the two text elements, and then I'll refresh the preview. And pretty soon you should see the same two text elements, but they are arranged much more neatly. I also want to make sure that the text elements inside of the column are horizontally arranged in the center. So what I'm going to do is inside of the parentheses for column is set the parameter for horizontal alignment equal to alignment.center horizontally. I'm also going to add a modifier over here. And the modifier parameter is going to be very important as we'll use this all the time to customize the look of our composable functions. I'll type modifier.padding because I want the padding function, and I'll set the padding to 27.dp. Now you'll notice that dp is the unit measurement used inside of Android, and currently we haven't imported it. So usually when you see a red highlighted text like this, it means that that package hasn't been imported. And you can simply import it by placing your cursor right after the keyword and pressing Option and Return, and that should automatically import it. And now if I rerun the preview, you can see that we have the text centered inside of the container and that we have a padding given to us just like we asked Jetpack Compose to do so. Next, inside of this column, I need to add a button, but you'll notice that there is some space in between the button and the text over here. So I'm going to type spacer and set the modifier such that it has a modifier.padding where the bottom padding is equal to a value of 27.dp. Now the next element that comes is obviously the button element. So I'll enter button, and you can see that autofill does most of the work for us, where we have an onClick parameter asking us what to do when a button is first clicked on. So for now, I'm going to press enter, and after that, we have how the button should look like. And so what I'm going to do is add a text label over here. And the value of the text is going to be get started now, as shown inside of our Figma design over here. Except this should be lowercase. So I'll say get started now, and now I'll refresh the preview. And you can see that the button appears inside of the card preview with the 27.dp spacer given to us over here. Wasn't that a very simple component to build? In fact, if you start the interactive mode for this preview, you can see that when you tap on the button, we get that ripple animation that is known to Android. Of course, it doesn't look exactly like what our design looks like, and this is where modifiers come in. So I'll be adding some modifiers to make our card look more like what we have inside of the Figma preview. Starting with the heading text, I'm going to set the color is equal to color.white. I'm going to set the font weight to font weight.bold. So I'll select that over here. I'll set the font size equal to 20.sp, and sp is the unit used for text measurement. So then I'll press Option and Return to import it. And finally, I'll set the text align equal to textalign.center. Now I'm going to press Option and Return one more time, and I'm going to select the put arguments on separate lines over here so that everything is refactored properly. Now I'm going to do the same thing to the next text that we have over here. I'll set the color equal to color.white, and I'll set the text align equal to textalign.center. I'll press Option and Return and put all the arguments on separate lines. I'll also make sure to reduce the opacity of this color. So I'll say color.white.copy with an alpha of 0.8f so that it has an 80% opacity. Now before I customize the button as well, let's refresh and see how it looks. And there you go. You can see that it's starting to look a bit like our design. Of course, it's not that visible because of the white font color, but we'll add a background, and so that will be fixed soon. Next comes the button. So inside of the parentheses for button, what I'm going to do is add a comma, and then I'm going to add the shape parameter over here. And I'll set the shape of the button to rounded corner shape, and the rounded corner shape is going to have a percent of 50, meaning that the corner radius should be rounded just like a capsule. I'll also add the modifier option, and I'll type set modifier is equal to modifier.border with a width of 1.dp, a color of color.white.copy, and the alpha is going to be 0.5f, and then I'll set the shape to the same rounded corner shape with a percent of 50. After two parentheses, I'll press Option and Return and ask to put the arguments on separate lines as we have over here. Now I also need to customize the text, and this is going to be very simple. For the text, I'm going to set the modifier equal to modifier.padding with a horizontal padding of 40.dp and a vertical padding of 4.dp. I'll also add the font size parameter and set this equal to 15.sp. Finally, I'll set the font weight to font weight dot semi-bold. I'll press Option and Return and put the arguments on separate lines. While we're here, we'll also add the background for our card. So to do this, what I'm going to do is select the entire column element that we have over here and cut it out. Then I'll add an element literally called card and paste it inside over here that we have over here. Finally, right before the column, I'm going to add an image element and set the image with the painter equal to painter resource with an ID of r.drawable.bg1. I'll also add the content description and simply say card background. Now I also need to add parameters to this image. So I'll add a modifier and set this equal to modifier.fillMaxSize, and I'll also add a content scale parameter and set this equal to content scale.crop. I'll press Option and Return and put these all on lines again. Now I'll build and refresh one more time just to see how it looks. There we go. Oh, and it looks like we used the wrong image, so instead of .bg1, let's use card blur. And now let's refresh the preview. And there we go. We can see that our card is currently really big, but we'll fix this soon enough. The first thing we're going to do is scroll down to the button that we have over here that has the text Get Started Now and make some modifications to this button. Right now, we have the shape parameter as part of the button, and then we've also included the modifier parameter for the button, which currently just gives a border of 1.dp with a white color, and the shape is limited to a rounded corner shape with a percent of 50, meaning that there will be a capsule in there. We're also going to add another parameter to button, and this parameter is going to be colors, which indicates the button colors. If you remember our preview, this was initially the primary color, which was that bright purple. However, we're going to change this such that we're going to make the colors equal to button defaults dot button colors, and here we can define the colors that we want. So let's go back over here and make sure this is button defaults dot button colors, and inside of the parentheses, I'm going to type background color is equal to color, add an open set of parentheses, and enter the following values: 151, 169, and then 246. And I'll also set the alpha equal to 0x32, which is a hex value that will be used to control the opacity. After background color, I'm also going to add another parameter called content color, and this is simply going to be color.white. I'll press Option and Return and put all the arguments on separate lines as shown over here. Now let's refresh the preview and take a look at our button to see how it looks right now. And there we go. We can see that this button looks a lot better and a lot more similar to what we have over here, instead of that bright vivid purple that we had before. Now what we're also going to do is limit the card that we have by adding some of the parameters at the very top inside of the card element. The first thing I'm going to do is set the elevation parameter, and I'll set it to 4.dp. I'll also add the modifier parameter and set that equal to modifier.border, and the border is going to have the following parameters: a width of 1.dp, and then I'll add a comma. It'll also have a color of color.white.copy with an alpha of 0.1f, and then a shape of rounded corner shape, and here it's going to have a corner radius of 27.dp. After the border parameter, I'll also make sure to clip this by the same shape of rounded corner shape of 27.dp. And now let's refresh the preview and take a look. There you go. We can see that we have a much better corner radius over here. And once we shorten the size of this card, it's going to closely match what we have inside of our design file, along with that white tint at the very top that we have over here. So what can we do now? Well, taking a look, this mostly looks like our login screen. However, what we need to do is place the card over the background and then add some elements right above the card. Specifically, we're going to add the text element right above it. So what I'll do is select this entire card element and cut it out. Then I'll add a column element, and inside of the curly braces, I'll paste the card element that we had. Now before the card element, as we know, comes the basic text element, and this is going to be very simple. All we have to do is add the following string: welcome to NFT Marketplace. Now this is going to have a color of color.white, and let me move this so that we get rid of the preview that was shown to us over there. After color, we'll also include the font size, and according to our design, we have a font size of 36.sp. We also have a font weight, where the font weight is set to fontweight.black. Now I'll refresh the preview, and let's take a look at what we have right now. Now we can see our text element over here, and we can see the size of the card has also shrunk. But to seal the deal, what we're going to do is place a new element in between text and card. And this is a new element known as the spacer element, which takes as much space as we require it to. So in our case, we're going to add a modifier to the spacer of modifier.fillMaxHeight, and the fraction we're going to use is 0.6f. So this is going to fill up the max height of 60% of the initial height of the device. And as soon as the preview has rendered, we should be able to see that the card has shrunk tremendously, and we also have our text given to us at the top. Now last but not least, what we need to do is add the background image over here. And we'll do this using a new element called box. Box is very similar to the ZStack view that we have inside of SwiftUI, which aligns elements one on top of each other. So inside of the box element, what I'm going to do is simply place the column element that we just created. I also can't forget, but I do need to add some modifiers to the column. And so inside of the parentheses for column, what I'm going to add is modifier.padding, and the padding is going to have a horizontal value of 32.dp and a vertical padding of 80.dp. And finally, I'll add another modifier called fill max size and add empty parentheses at the end. To make this more legible, I'm going to press enter before each of the following functions, so we can see that the modifiers that we have applied are .padding and .fill size. I'll remove the parentheses here, and then let's refresh our preview to take a look and see how our card looks like. So currently this is the old preview, but as soon as the preview has shown, we can see that we have the paddings added, and all we need to do now is add the background image that we wanted. Right before column, I'm going to add image, add a set of parentheses, and I'll set painter equal to r.drawable.bg1. I'll set the content description equal to, and I'll simply call this background image, and this is used for accessibility purposes, by the way, the content description parameter. I'll set the modifier equal to modifier.fillMaxSize because I want the image to stretch to the edges of the device, and finally I'll set the content scale to contentscale.crop so that every part of the image is zoomed in rather than having it show the entire image but not covering the entire device. And right over here it looks like I made a mistake where instead of painter we actually need to type painter resource, and the ID we pass is r.drawable.bg1 over here. So now I'll refresh the preview and let's take a look and see how it looks like. And there we go. We have our card preview over here, But one last thing we need to do is wrap all this whole element inside of a scaffold. So I'm going to copy box and cut it, and then I'll add the scaffold element. Now, the scaffold element is native to Android, and if you've taken a course with me, and specifically the Flutter for Designers course that I may have created a while back, you'll know exactly what the scaffold is used for. You can think of the scaffold as a canvas for each screen that is used inside of an Android application. Inside of this canvas goes all of our elements. And while this visually may not have any changes, this will be incredibly useful when we get to the navigation section of this course. And that's it. This is our onboarding screen. It looks pretty good, and feel free to tinker around with some of the values. Now, of course, the one thing you might notice that is different from our preview is that the height of this card is actually a bit larger than what we have in our design file, and that there's a lot of spacing given at the bottom over here. So to do this, what I'm going to do is identify the spacer element that we have over here and change the modifier of fill max height from having a fraction of 0.6f to 0.65f. And that makes our card look much better. And what's really cool is that without having to implement any animations at all, and by using the standard elements, if I start the interactive mode, which is this left button in the top right corner, and click on it, when I click on the button, we can see that we have this amazing Android animation that we get when buttons are tapped on. So you can see the ripple start from wherever I tap on. And that's exactly why it's great to use the standard elements inside of Jetpack Compose. So I'll stop running interactive mode. And now taking a look at our design, we can see that the onboarding screen is complete. And it took us only 2 videos to implement the whole thing. Isn't that pretty fascinating? Now, of course, this NFT Marketplace app was designed to be run on iOS, but we'll be able to port it over to Android using the best Android design guidelines. Now, before we go on any further and build the rest of our NFT Marketplace application, what we're going to do is take a step back in the next section and explore the Kotlin programming language. So if this is your first time working with this language, we'll explore the fundamentals of this language and see how to create variables, final constants, functions, and more using Kotlin right inside of Android Studio. So I'll see you all then. Thanks for watching and talk to you soon. Goodbye!